Now starting the September 3rd, 2020 Mount Pleasant Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Kane, will you take roll?
Commissioner Daly, Commissioner Friedrich,
Here.
Commissioner Honig,
Here.
Commissioner Horgan,
Here.
Commissioner Irwin,
I think he was.
Commissioner Irwin. He's working on it. Well, I'll come back. Commissioner Kostreva, Commissioner Leash,
Here.
Commissioner Orman,
Here.
Commissioner Irwin, oh, I know he's in attendance but unable to speak. Madam Chair, you do have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. And next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Oh, roll call vote, Mr. Kane.
Thank you,
Oh,
Madam Chair. Commissioner Friedrich,
Yay.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin. If you'd like to vote with a thumbs up or thumbs down, Commissioner Irwin, I can see you. So, all right, that's an aye. Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman.
Aye.
All right, Madam Chair, that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. First, the August 6, 2020 regular meeting minutes.
I move to
Second.
approve the minutes.
Answer proceed. So I urge you, he's going to be speaking 12. You can't see anything.
Was there a second on that motion, Madam Chair?
I seconded.
Any discussion? Mr. Kane, if you'll take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin, Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is approval of the August 6, 2020 work session minutes.
Move to approve the work session minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig, sorry,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin. Looks like we've lost audio with Commissioner Irwin. Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman.
Aye.
I don't think we have video of him either.
We'll take that, Madam Chair, that motion passed unanimously with Commissioner Irwin abstaining.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. And next item on the agenda is Zoning Board of Appeals report, Commissioner Friedrich.
Madam Chair, we did not meet last month.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is communications, Mr. Kane.
Madam Chair, you have one communication in your packet tonight, which is from the Mount Pleasant Convention and Visitors Bureau regarding the 2050 master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. And next item on the agenda is SUP 2007 and SPR 2009, Mr. Kane.
Madam Chair, good evening. Go ahead and share my screen. Is everyone able to see my presentation?
Uh-huh.
All right, our first case tonight is a special use permit and site plan review for 1701 and 1703 Fessenden. This is a two-family dwelling. The applicant is proposing to install concrete driveways at an existing two-family dwelling at this location. Property in question is zone CD3 suburban. No special requirements apply. The future land use is urban residential. As I mentioned, the request is for special use permit and site plan review to install concrete driveways at the existing two-family dwelling. The current and prior use is as a two-family dwelling. The property owner and the owner occupant of the property is Linda Tippett. The site area is 0.24 acres. Property location is on the south side of Fessenden Street, just east of Bradley Street. Properties to the north, south, east, and west are zone CD3 suburban, the same as the subject property. All properties in the immediate vicinity have a future land use of urban residential. All but one property adjacent to this location is a single family dwelling. The property immediately to the south is also a two-family dwelling. On the screen, you'll see a photo of the property. This is looking from Fessenden towards the south, towards the first unit, 1701. You'll see the existing gravel driveway. The next image will show the opposite side of the property, also looking to the south from Fessenden at the 1703 unit, and again, the existing gravel driveway. Two-family dwellings are subject to a special use permit in the CD3 zoning district. There are certain special use permit criteria that two-family dwellings must meet in order to receive a special use permit. Those special use conditions are shown on the screen. They mainly have to do with the interior configuration of the building. As you know, a new two-family dwelling also must meet additional criteria, which do not apply in this case because this two-family dwelling legally existed as of the adoption of current two-family standards on February 21, 2018. The site plan is shown on the screen. So to your left, the left side of the screen, you'll see the proposed 10-foot 6-inch driveway that would be installed in concrete for the unit at 1701. Right inside, proposed 14-foot driveway to the unit for 1703. This would also be in concrete. Both driveways would essentially extend to the current extent of the gravel driveways. Both driveways are designed in a manner that's consistent with the code requirements for driveways in the CD3 zoning district. I will note that the code does not require in the CD3 district for driveways to be paved or hard surfaced, but when they are paved or hard surfaced, they do have to meet certain criteria within the zoning code. The plan submitted complies with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. There are no building modifications proposed in this case, so there's no standards for setbacks or building that apply. In terms of vehicle parking standards, as I noted, the proposed driveways are consistent with the standards for the CD3 zoning district. So as a result, staff is recommending approval of the special use permit and site plan review, subject to complying with the requirements of Public Works. Those requirements in this case are primarily obtaining the necessary permits for right-of-way work and for stormwater before initiating construction. We've already been in communication with the contractor in this case to ensure that those permits will be filed before construction begins. At this point, I'd welcome any questions from the Planning Commission. Madam Chair.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Kane? Okay, seeing no questions, I will invite the applicant to speak.
All right.
Am I on?
1 second. Nick, could you unmute the 989-779-5346 participant? I'm not able to get that to work.
You're gonna have to unshare the screen so I can see the menu.
Okay.
Am I on?
Just a moment. We're trying to get the audio squared away.
It should be unmuted. I can hear her.
We can hear her.
I can hear.
Perfect. All right. Ms. Tippett, you're up.
All right. All I have to say is that I'm not proposing any major changes. I just want to upgrade the driveways from gravel to cement, which will improve the house and improve the neighborhood.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay, hearing no questions from the Planning Commission. Thank you very much, Linda. And now I'll open the public hearing if anyone from the public would like to comment. Mr. Kane, is there anyone from the public?
The only member of the public that I see in attendance is the mayor. And so if you would like to use the raise hand function or turn on video if you would like to participate in the public hearing. I will also check our electronic comment email to see if we've received anything and during the course of the conversation, and we have not. So I believe we are ready to close the public comment period.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Now I'll close public comment and open up discussion.
I move to approve SUP 2007 and SPR 2009, subject to the following condition: comply with the requirements of Public Works.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin, Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that was unanimous with the exception of Commissioner Irwin, who's not currently connected to the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Next item on the agenda is SUP 2008. Mr. Kane?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll let our applicant know your case was approved, so we'll look forward to working with you. Have a good night. Bye. Okay. Our next case this evening, I'll go ahead and share my screen again. Our next case is a request for a special use permit for a off-premise tasting room. The subject property is located on West Broadway Street and is zone CD5 Urban Center with a residential dwelling use restriction, which prohibits ground level residential. The land use is Central Business District. The property is a coffee shop. The owner is TNC Holdings LLC, and the site is 0.03 acres. So this is a very pretty property indeed. As I mentioned, the site is located on West Broadway Street at 205 West Broadway. Properties located to the west, east, and south have the same zoning land, future land use as the subject property. The property immediately to the north is zone civic zone and is a public city parking lot. In the immediate proximity, the other uses include a beauty school, a ski company, and a logistics company. On the screen, you'll see a photograph of the existing conditions of the coffee shop. This is from West Broadway Street looking toward the south. The request tonight is for an off-premise tasting room for a winemaker. So for those who aren't familiar with this use, essentially the state of Michigan offers an opportunity for those who hold a winemaker license for wine manufacturing to obtain a certain number of off-premise serving licenses that they can use at other locations throughout the state of Michigan. The applicant is proposing for a particular type of off-premise license that would allow a full glass of wine to be served, and the manufacturer can have up to 5 of those licenses at a time in the state of Michigan. In this case, the manufacturer in question is Blue Water Winery, which is a small winemaker located in Carsonville, Michigan. It is service coordinated within the existing coffee shop, and that service may also include some additional menu items that are not currently offered at Pleasant City Coffee. The applicant is utilizing the outdoor seating that exists seasonally along West Broadway Street in the right-of-way. I will remind the Planning Commission that the Planning Commission does not issue or approve those outdoor dining licenses. Those are initially issued by the City Commission and reviewed by staff when there's not a history of complaints associated with the license. As noted in your packet, the applicant has indicated that in the future they may consider adding some additional seating either at the rear of the site or as in the form of a rooftop deck on the building. Any approval of those expansions or modifications to site would require an additional review by the Planning Commission at a later date. The proposed hours of operation would be at a maximum 8 a.m. to 12 a.m., 12 midnight, but the applicant intends initially to only be open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. A off-premise license of this type is considered a bar, restaurant, or bar, nightclub, or tavern under the city's zoning code. There is one special use condition that applies specifically to that use category, which is the use cannot be within 50 feet of a property that's in one of our 2 residential districts, CD3L or CD3, measured property line to property line. In this case, this property is well over 50 feet from the closest residential district. There are no comments from either of the reviewing divisions, Public Works or Public Safety tonight. And so we've got a rarity here, which is a straight staff recommendation of approval with no conditions associated. We do have the applicant, Josh Agerty, on the line with us. If there are any questions for him, and I would welcome any questions from the Planning Commission as well, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kane? Hearing none, would the applicant like to speak?
You see me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Joshua Garda here. Thank you so much, commissioners, tonight for having me on your agenda. And I appreciate the time you put into this project that we're working on tonight. It's a very exciting project for us because my family and I built this vineyard 15 years ago, and it really matured. And my aunt has been running it all these years, and I've been doing other things, having children, and open Pleasant City Coffee. And to see this come full circle in this way is quite a surprise and excitement. And considering the conditions we're in with the COVID crisis, our small businesses need as much help as we can to diversify and make something new and exciting for the community to go out and enjoy when we can go out and enjoy. As we know, we've been doing the outside seating and making that the best we could do. So I just wanted to say I'm excited about this, and I appreciate your time. And it's an exciting project for Mount Pleasant and the downtown business district to consider.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Agerty. I will open up public comment if there's anyone from the public that would like to comment. Mr. Kane, there's no one waiting or anything?
No, and Madam Chair, we don't have any communications in our comment email box either.
Thank you. And I'm closing public comment and opening up discussion.
All three of those proposed phases sound like a great thing for downtown and bring more people downtown at different hours of the day and at different backgrounds, different price points for consumers and whatnot. Move to approve SUP 2008.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan.
Aye.
Looks like we lost Commissioner Irwin again. Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Next item on the agenda is public comment. If there's anyone from the public that would like to comment, this would be your last opportunity to do so.
Am I still public?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you, commissioners, for your time and the approval of this project for us. It's a starting point, and we're very excited and like to see all things go forward and get better for downtown. So I think any other questions for me, I can step off the meeting.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
You too. Any other public comment? Mr. Kane, still no emails coming in or anything? Okay, I'll close public comment, and next item on the agenda is new business, discuss amendment to table 154-405A of the zoning ordinance and consider setting a public hearing on this issue at the October 1st, 2020 regular meeting. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You'll all recall that in work session last month, we discussed a referral from the City Commission that was an outcome of the 2019 housing report. And that referral has to do with the land area requirements of the CD4 zoning district. Currently, the land area requirements in the CD4 zoning district require allow no more than 15 units per acre, which translates to 2,904 square feet of land per unit in that district. That standard has been in place for several decades. The housing report, part of that housing report was looking at the opportunities for missing middle housing types in the city, and if there were any regulatory burdens that were preventing the construction of that housing type, as has been noted both in the 2016 housing study that was conducted as part of a region-wide target market analysis, and also the staff-produced housing report from 2019, that there's a rather significant undersupply of missing middle housing types. In fact, in Mount Pleasant, and That missing status is because they've been regulatorily, in effect, banned in the city of Mount Pleasant, either directly, as was the case with accessory dwelling units for a number of years in Mount Pleasant, or indirectly because our standards preclude or make it financially infeasible to construct those housing types. At the work session, the Planning Commission indicated there was general agreement to consider a modification, and I was asked to do two things. One, to bring forward a recommended number for that modification, and two, to provide some examples to illustrate the impact of such a change. And so I have done that for you tonight. Staff's recommendation is that the standard for the CD4 zoning district be adjusted from 15 units per acre, as is the current standard, to 30 units per acre. And I've outlined three different scenarios as best I could to find some typical scenarios to outline how this would impact the opportunities for development within the city. One thing that I tried to do with these examples was, like I said, number one, find some typical examples. So most typical lot configuration in the city of Mount Pleasant is going to be either a 66 by 122 foot lot. That's very common in our residential and multifamily districts, or a 50 by 100 foot lot. There's also two conditions that are quite common. One condition is having alley access at the rear, and the other condition is having no alley access. And obviously, alley access can provide some additional flexibility when it comes to the provision of parking, and also give you some additional site layout opportunities that a site without alley access offers. I tried to look at a few different scenarios. One was a townhouse or sort of a micro unit scenario. One was a duplex scenario, and the third was more of a multifamily building scenario with a larger structure. In each of these cases, the three projects would essentially be not permitted under today's code with the 15 unit per acre cap. They would be possible under the proposed amendment of 30 units per acre. Each of the projects allocates a minimum of one parking space per unit. In two of the examples, it would provide for 2 parking spaces per unit. And staff also aimed to provide units that were approximately a 1-bedroom unit in terms of square footage, that provided for the multifamily unit building common space, which is typical in a building which would have 10 or more units within it, and also to preserve open space where possible. So you'll note that none of these projects requires full lot coverage or anything approaching full lot coverage. I aimed, and as I'm sure you know or assume, site design is not necessarily what I'm trained to do. I'm trained to review site plans, not to create them. And so I'm certain that someone who's had professional expertise in site design probably would both cringe at these layouts, but also could potentially come up with some more creative alternatives for these layouts than what staff has provided. But essentially, I aim to maintain a front yard in 2 of the examples, to maintain setbacks in 2 of the examples from adjacent properties, to maintain as much open space in a rear yard as possible, while still providing parking in each case. There are obviously modifications that can be made to these examples within these examples, either by making units larger or smaller, by providing more or less parking, or more or less open space. There's always trade-offs that go with all of those things. But this was just essentially an opportunity to just illustrate, in 3 cases, development projects that would not be possible under today's standard, that would be made possible by making an adjustment in that land area per unit requirement. So with that, I would welcome any questions the Planning Commission might have. Tonight's request is simply for the Planning Commission to set a public hearing on a text amendment that would affect this change at your October 1st meeting.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kane?
I noticed that in the first example, one of the alternate configurations with having the example of a 6-unit apartment would have a 32 units per acreage, which would be slightly over what would be allowed. So I guess I was just kind of wondering what the thought process was of choosing 30 versus maybe bumping that up to 32 for accommodating that.
That's a great question. I mean, I think part of it was simple numbers are sometimes just easier to work with, and the 32 in terms of breaking it down into acreage just comes out with a nice clean number to work with.
Yeah.
Part of it is I'm sensitive to the fact that some folks will have concern about this type of density increase, and so trying to keep it reasonable with really the intent. In the case of example one, this is really meant to illustrate the fact that, you know, we've heard from the community, members of the community over the last several years, even predating my time with the city, that there was a desire for townhouse style development. And we have a very limited amount of truly urban style townhouses in the city. We certainly have townhouse style apartment complexes, but to have townhouse style development integrated into the central part of the city. And this just shows you that to do truly townhouse style development, it's not possible on a traditional lot in the city. And so any amount of increase above that 15 units per acre opens up and unlocks a lot of opportunity. I certainly, from my own perspective, professionally and personally, am not opposed to a higher allowance, but I felt 30 units per acre was probably a more palatable adjustment for most folks, and still permits a great deal more opportunity than currently exists.
Jacob, I also really like that first example that you have there too. And you're right, even before you were here, there was a desire for townhouse style. Would you be opposed to going to 35 units just to cover that type of scenario? And still fairly common number.
No, I am open to the number that you all want. As I said at the work session, the direction was to come up with a number.
Yeah, a bigger number.
Right. And so I looked at some scenarios and I wanted to see what made sense, and 30 seemed to make sense. But certainly if the Planning Commission would prefer a different number of any sort, I can both run some of those numbers tonight if it's helpful, but we can plug that into that ordinance very simply as part of the public hearing process and bring that forward in the public hearing next month.
Any other questions for Mr. Kane? Any discussion?
Any of the rest, do you feel that moving to 35 would be something we want to do, or stick with 30?
I think
don't-
that, oh, go ahead, Sue.
No, I was gonna say, it doesn't bother me to go to 35, but go,
Okay.
Matt.
What I was going to say is that at our most recent work session, I mean, we just came up with 30 somewhat arbitrarily. There was, as I recall, it was just like, well, we went with double, and that was my recollection of it. I mean, if it said 50, if it said, 40, if it said 32, I just wanted to say this to reiterate that we didn't really have any, amongst planning commissioners, had no real set time saying it should be this. It's just, we wanted to increase it and have this discussion at least.
I'm not opposed to it being 35.
Jacob, would you need me to make a motion to move it to 35?
If you would like to include that in the motion to set the public hearing, I think we could accomplish that with one motion if there's support from your fellow planning commissioners.
All right. I'd like to try to get in one motion here. To increase the gross or per acre unit gross number to 35, and to set a public hearing on text change 2001 at the October 1st, 2002 regular meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take roll call?
Commissioner Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. And next item on the agenda is staff report. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Got a lot to share tonight. The first item I wanted to remind everybody about the 2020 census. The deadline to complete your census is September the 30th. If you know anyone at all in Mount Pleasant, Isabella County, state of Michigan, the United States of America, who has not completed their census, please encourage them to go to my2020census.gov before September 30 to be counted. Very, very critical. Obviously, COVID-19 has been very disruptive to that process, as it's been disruptive to just about everything in our society. And so if you have not done so, please do that today. You all likely are aware that in August, the selection committee chose 3 adult use marijuana retailer applicants to move forward in the licensing process. Those applicants were Loom Cannabis Company for 2 locations, one at 1207 North Mission Street, one at 901 East Broomfield Street, and House of Fire Provisioning at 1005 Corporate Drive. Given the timelines that are in place in the adult use marijuana ordinance, those applicants will need to file their special use permits for the Planning Commission all on a timeline that would have them come forward to your November meeting. So I'm anticipating that we'll have those 3 special use permanent site plan reviews in November. Of course, next month is the public hearing on the proposed 2050 master plan. So that is a big deal. We had good participation in the virtual open house and the interactive website and survey. I'll be working with McKenna to incorporate some language into the plan document to reference the fact that we did encounter some delays in our process due to COVID-19 and to reflect some of the results of those surveys. Overall, though, I will tell you that the feedback was really very positive in terms of what people had to say about what they saw in the plan. And, you know, we learned a bit about how the COVID-19 situation has impacted people's kind of wants for the future. Next month, you'll also have the public hearing on the text change that you set tonight. We have 2 cases that have already been filed. One is a rezoning for 623 South Fancher, which is currently a church in a civic zone, proposal to rezone it to CD3 residential. We'll also have a case for a special use permit for the installation of electric car charging stations at an existing gas station. And sorry, what was that?
Oh, I just said, ooh, wow.
Oh, wow, yeah. Our deadline for submittal is Tuesday, so we may still have some additional cases come forward, but that is what we know about at this time. And the final thing I'll let you know, for those who weren't already aware, Becky Murphy in our planning office is retiring on December 1st. So you'll be getting your packets from Becky for another 2 months. And if you're in the office, I just want to let everybody know in advance, so it wasn't a big surprise. We're very, very happy for Becky and her retirement. It's well deserved. We're obviously going to miss her tremendously. She's an outstanding colleague here, a very hard worker, and just a lot of fun to work with. And so please, if you have an opportunity to congratulate her on her retirement, I'm sure she will be very angry at me for letting everyone know. But I'm sure she would also appreciate hearing it from you. I'm also happy to let you know that we have hired Laura Delameter from the city's treasurer's office to replace Becky in December. And so you'll be getting to know Laura over the next couple months. Who knows, we may actually have an in-person meeting again sometime this decade. So if and when that happens, we'll be sure to let you get to meet Laura. She's going to be an outstanding addition to our team, and we are very excited to have her, even at the same time that we're very sad to see Becky go. So that's all I have, and we'll look forward to moving into work session.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Any questions for Mr. Kane? Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn to the work session?
Move to adjourn to the work session.
Second.
Hearing adjourned. Do we need a break, or should we just?
I don't.
Now starting the September 3rd, 2020 work session, Mr. Kane.
Madam Chair, As you know, we have, over the last several years, been engaged in dialogue with the Home Builders Association of Central Michigan, along with some of their individual members of that organization with regard to residential standards that are included in the current zoning ordinance. Most recently, in December of last year and January of this year, we had work sessions as a commission to discuss those standards. The consensus up to this point has been to maintain the standards as is and to revisit the issue again early next year. It will probably not surprise you to know that we've maintained ongoing contact and dialogue with those members and the HBA in order to see if we could find some common ground on these issues. I guess initially to make sure we understood the issues completely, to make sure that we could find an outcome that would respect the spirit of the code that was adopted in 2018 and respect the spirit of the public input that was gathered as part of that coding process, while also recognizing and acknowledging the concerns that have been brought to us over the last couple of years. So I'm happy to say that we've had a breakthrough in that process. It's been a long road, and we're very appreciative of the fact that those members and the HBA have been very patient about continuing to have that dialogue. Even as for several months, it wasn't terribly productive, at least at the time. But I do think in the end, all of that dialogue was very productive as it got us to an outcome, which I think everyone is happy with in terms of the HBA and staff. As I said, I think that the outcome that I'm bringing forward tonight in terms of a resolution to some of those issues still respects the coding process that took place in 2016 and 2017. But I think it also introduces some flexibility that will be beneficial. I think that some of the changes in terms of the flexibility will actually result in housing development that is a better fit in certain neighborhoods than the current standards might necessarily result in. But I do think it's going to continue to provide some more predictability and higher quality development than the standards that were previously adopted by the city. Having said all that, as you might expect, we've been having this dialogue for a couple of years now, and the changes proposed aren't necessarily simple. They're pretty extensive. And so staff has prepared two documents for your consideration tonight. One is a draft ordinance, which presents the proposed changes in the typical ordinance form. Probably more helpful to you tonight would be the second attachment, which is a table which outlines the proposed changes in comparison to the existing code language. So I'm bringing this forward tonight for discussion so that the Planning Commission can provide any input they may wish to provide on the topic. And then ultimately, I'd be looking for if there's consensus around what to bring forward and how to bring this forward, I would put this on your new business agenda at your October meeting and ask you to set a public hearing for November. So if it's helpful, I'd be happy to go through the various sections of the table one by one, or we could start with just questions from the Planning Commission and go from there.
Okay. Any questions? Anybody?
Well, I have one, Jacob. I see in a lot of these, I see the word average of existing buildings nearby too. Is that actually going to end up watering down the code if you could just build similar to what's next door?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the spirit of the code and the form-based code process is to result in development that is consistent with the things around it, particularly in cases. Any code can be used in, I guess, a couple different ways. So let me back up. So you can have a code that's trying to reinforce what's out in your community already. And sometimes you can use a code to try to transition or transform what's in the community into something totally different. I will say that our coding process was definitely trying to accomplish both objectives. I think it was a little bit more transformational through our commercial coding in certain parts of the community and more trying to preserve through that same coding in other parts of the community. So for example, the CD5 district is applied to Mission Street is more transformative, as applied to downtown Mount Pleasant is really more of a preservation code to try to get development that looks like what's already there. In the residential districts, the intent was to try to mirror the areas of the community that people said that they liked the best, and to try to kind of impose those standards citywide. I think what this code will do is that it will ensure that in applying some of those general principles, we don't have an outcome where we have a result that's really out of keeping with the majority of developed homes in a neighborhood. We do have, for the most part, our residential neighborhoods are built out with, I think last count when we talked about this, we had about 50 to 60 infill lot opportunities. Some of those are double lots that exist on the community that aren't necessarily for sale. Some of those are vacant lots. In most cases, there are houses on both sides of those lots already. And so this code would allow for someone, let's say, for instance, we have two homes on neighboring lots that are both built at 35 feet from the property line. This would allow for that neighbor that builds in the middle to build back to 35 feet as well. It doesn't require them to do so. They would still maintain the flexibility of using the adopted standard, but it would give them that flexibility. If we're in a position in the future where we do have a new neighborhood that's being built where there are lots that don't have development on either side, then those base code standards will apply. So in new neighborhood settings, we'll still get the vision for new neighborhood development. In an infill situation, we'll get development that maybe looks a little bit more consistent with the existing development patterns in those neighborhoods.
So do you feel that these changes would still result in transitional, but at a slower pace maybe than if we didn't have these?
I think that anytime
Like beyond our lifetimes, I'm thinking.
Well, when you're dealing with infill lots, I think you're not generally dealing with transformative development. I think during the outreach for the code, I think the message I received most strongly was that folks didn't want major changes in their neighborhoods. I think folks wanted development that looked like it fit in the neighborhood. And I know that we can all probably think of a few examples around town where there's been some infill development over the recent past that has maybe not quite felt like it fit in. And I think that this additional flexibility on setbacks, on frontage build outs, on roof pitch, on garage location will ensure that those infill lots do fit the existing pattern more closely than they otherwise would.
Okay.
Jacob, could you define lot layer? It's been a long time since I've read that, so my other planning commissioners might be interested as well.
Great question. So lot layers are a form-based code concept that sort of mirror the concept of a front, side, and rear yard. They're really intended to reinforce sort of the straight front of a project and ensure that certain items on a lot are not placed at or too close to the street frontage. As defined in our code, the first lot layer is anything from the home or building to the street. The second lot layer is anything from that line at the home or building 20 feet toward the back of the lot. And then the third lot layer would be anything from that line 20 feet back to the back property line. So the third lot layer is sort of essentially the backyard. The first lot layer is sort of essentially the front yard. And the second lot layer would be sort of that first 20 feet of the side yards for a particular property.
Can you, the patio and decks? I don't even kind of remember talking about that before.
Right. So while we're in the midst of this, Brian Kench, our building official, and I, if we're going to take the opportunity to clean up the standards in the residential district, we looked at the entirety of the standards to see if there was anything else that in the application of this code over the past going on 3 years now, if there's any other challenges we've encountered either in clarity of the code or just in direct application of the code. The patio decks is one of those areas where I believe there's just simply an "and" missing in the phrase. I believe this in the table should say patios and decks, and it says patio decks. So I believe it's an error.
Oh, so it's just a text change.
Yeah, and essentially, we would permit a covered porch to encroach into the front property line. Obviously, porches add a lot of value to the streetscape because they activate it by giving people a place to be in the front yard. And it seemed that there was a logic behind allowing a deck or patio for the same purpose, that folks could sit in their front yard and they'd be able to engage with their neighbors and do the type of things that people routinely tell us that they're looking for: stronger neighborhoods. They want to know their neighbors. There's a lot of positive kind of sociological benefits from having neighbors that know each other, crime prevention, things of that nature. So just this would provide that additional flexibility for any type of seating area at the front, whether it's a covered porch, a patio, or a deck.
Okay.
I will say the same. So the standards is outlined in conversation with the Home Builders Association. We were primarily focused on the front setbacks for the principal building, the front setbacks for accessory buildings specific to attached garages, the roof pitch standards, the garage location standards. Those were the 4 areas where we've had the most dialogue with the home builders. In looking at our own kind of situational experience with the code internally, we included the frontage build out standards. There needed to be some modification there because of the increased allowance for attached garage location to permit some of that garage to count towards the build out. We recognize that, again, because many of our infill lots are already platted, they already exist. They may be, 100, 120 feet wide. That imposing a build out standard would result in a very specific type of housing that is really not consistent with what the code vision was. The code vision was really trying to get towards narrower, taller housing that was more traditional in style. And that would almost require a long linear house type on those type of lots. And so eliminating that standard in the residential districts made sense just from the aspect of not obtaining, not enforcing a particular design aesthetic on a particular new build in those districts. In the CD4 district, where we're dealing with commercial buildings, office buildings, as well as residential buildings, we've maintained that build out standard, but just provided some additional flexibility where we might have some attached duplexes, townhome type development to allow for an attached garage to count towards that build out requirement.
Any other questions or comments?
We can obviously continue to have additional discussion at the next meeting, and then we'll have a public hearing at the following meeting. I think at various points over the last 3 years, I wasn't certain we would ever get to a point where we had changes that we could bring forward that had staff and HBA support. So just speaking for myself, I can say it's a great relief to have arrived at this point. And I am recommending that you consider adoption of these amendments, not just because they have HBA support, but because I do think that they will make the code stronger, and they will result in most cases in the same high quality of development we were looking for, but with a level of flexibility that I think will also be very beneficial to our local property owners. So when I do bring this forward next month for public hearing, I will be recommending adoption.
Okay. Thank you for all your patient work with the group. It's better.
Do we need to move to adjourn, or can we just, I can't remember.
Are we done?
That's all I have for work session tonight. Certainly, if you'd like to move by unanimous consent to adjournment, I won't oppose.
If Do we have unanimous consent to adjourn this meeting?
No one objects. I think you're safe.
Yeah.
Okay,
Bye.
meeting adjourned.
Have a nice holiday, everyone.
You
Thank
too.
you too.